Hi, and welcome to the Rags to Riches show with myself, Terry Blackburn. So today's guest is a returning guest, someone I class as a good friend, somebody who's very experienced, very knowledgeable, very humble, and very experienced in business in actually a few different areas of the wealth creation that we all talk about. His name is Kevin Whelan. So welcome back to the show, Kevin.
Well, thank you, Terry, and fellow Geordie. It's always nice to come and hear the old dulcets expressing in the way that I'm not normally used to hearing. People normally kind of talk a little bit different, don't they? So it's very nice to catch up with you again.
They do. No, likewise. And all the talent lives up north. I've been saying that for a long time.
Yeah,
But
that's
some people
true.
disagree. But no, thank you for coming back on, Kevin. There's a couple of reasons why I wanted you back on. One is just to see how things are now, what you were up to, because I know you're interested or you're involved in lots of different things, not just property, not just business, various things. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And I think you've launched a new concept or a new part of wealth builders for families, which I'm really interested in. Being a parent myself, something I'm really passionate about, and I really like the topic. And I think the topic's very different. What you guys are trying to do, I think, is great. So I think we'll get on to that. Certainly, parents that are listening, I think this will be an interesting episode for you. But first of all, Kevin, what's happening with yourself, business-wise, property-wise? What you're involved in? Are you doing more of anything, less of anything? What are you doing at the moment?
Well, I think what's great about the whole concept of wealth creation is the diversification of and being fleet-footed to be able to respond to whatever economic circumstances life throws at us. I know you're a big fan of Jim Rohn, and you often use a quote from him. Well, I'll use one, which is the same wind, or in my language, economic wind, blows on us all, but it's the set of our sail that makes the key difference. So there's so many challenges economically, socially, geopolitically. Everywhere you look, there's instability, uncertainty, and unpredictability. So I never do predictions except to say that success and failure is entirely predictable when it comes to building wealth. And all you need to do is stick to some principles. So I just don't deviate from principles, to be honest. So there isn't anything that's new, that's different, except look, interest rates are higher than they were last time we spoke. So there's more room for cash, but if you've got cash, but the cost of borrowing money has gone up. So you've got to be a bit more creative when it comes to the financing. You've got certain types of property will be more hard pressed than others. So we've seen a growth in dilapidated properties being bought because you can buy them with your pension. And because you can buy them with a pension and nobody else is buying them because they need mortgages, then you can create a unique niche for yourself. So I'm all up for looking at niches whenever niches appear. And being outstanding in a niche is better than being mediocre in a market.
Being outstanding in a niche is better than being
Mediocre in a market.
Like that. I like that. Just a dead short, because if you haven't listened to the first episode me and Kevin done, I'd recommend you listen back. We'll talk a lot about SaaSes and how they work, but in a sentence or two, what can people do with SaaSes in relation to property? Just for those that don't know.
Yeah, well, look, for most people, the word pension is grey and dreary, isn't it? Almost like the Northeast. Nobody wants to go there. It's terrible. It's terrible. People have a terrible relationship with their pension. I don't. I have an excited relationship with a pension because I own it. I'm the trustee of it, which means it's like a business. So what the SaaS does, small self-administered scheme, is turns an old pension that's in somebody else's hands, puts the money in your hands to do what you want to do. So if you want to buy a dilapidated property, do it. You want to buy a commercial property and convert it, do it. If you want to buy a barn and convert it, do it. If you want to buy a church and convert it, do it. If you want to buy a hotel, you can do it. So you can do pretty much anything you want with pension money that for most people gets consigned to a box that says do not disturb till 65, but you can put that money on the table for someone like you as young as 35. So you can bring money into play. And the key issue when you asked earlier on offline, what's happening in the world, what's happening in the market, do you think that's relevant? I would say that knowing where money is available to you and having creative financing means that you can get into opportunities other people can't. And that's where you create your niche.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
that's what a podcast does. It just brings that money on the table. And because you can collaborate, you can have yourself, a spouse or partner, you can have business partners. A maximum of 11 people can put their money together. And if you get 3-4 people put their money together, you've got buying power. And what can you get with buying power? Discounts, which means speed, which means more value, and you're adding value from day one. So the art of all of this stuff that I get to live my life and do and never get bored with doing, despite the fact, I'm considerably older than you, is that I'm fascinated by other people and how they're reacting and creating more value when other people see markets. What's the stock market doing? Don't care. What's the housing market doing? Actually, I don't really care. I don't really care about what markets do. They're just pockets of opportunity everywhere. And that's what I do. I seek out those pockets and then share them with my members. My business is called Wealth Builders, so I share it with those members and share insights wherever I can on my own podcast or on articles or blogs or books or whatever. So like you, I'm an enthusiastic sharer.
Love that. And yeah, it's something that opened my eyes a little bit when we first spoke. Obviously, being in financial services myself, I was aware of pensions, and obviously I did have a bit of that view. What's the point? I'm not 55 yet. I'm nowhere near 55 yet. I'm not going to touch it then. Never mind 65. And then when you talk us about loan back schemes and about being able to access it and use it a lot younger, that certainly sparked my interest in it. And like you rightly say it as well, irrelevant of rates, if you accumulate and are putting together a few people's pension pots, you can be buying with that pot, and rates aren't even included in those conversations. So that's a great angle, actually. I'm sure that
You
the
become
listener,
your own bank in reality. You become your own bank, and you become, Bank of Terry, Bank of Kev, Bank of whoever, because you can
yeah,
combine those parts. And you're quite right. You don't need to worry about interest rates because the money's already there.
love that, love that. And are you actively buying yourself still, Kevin? Are you still in the growth phase? I know you do loads of different things. Are you still buying property personally, or is that not something you're looking at the moment?
At the minute, I'm exploring a few things, but I'm definitely funding some things because that's again another beauty that looking for property and looking for opportunities, whether it's business or property, joint ventures, or whether it's creating intellectual property. I'm always looking for those ideas, but more often than not, I'm connected to people who find them before me. Right? There's thousands of people finding stuff, and they've got a good deal. I'll just fund that, and get a share of the value without having to create the value, because the value is being created in the power of the relationship. So if you think about money and the value, the highest form of value in terms of a currency is the quality and the integrity of the relationships you build and maintain. So I've been able to do that. And as a result, people bring opportunities to me that they found, but they perhaps need some help. So I'm very comfortable in the funding environment, and I'm better at that than I am at the property side specifically, although I'm not immune to seeing an opportunity myself, but I don't look for those. I'm too busy in my businesses to worry about that.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair enough. The more people I speak to who are sort of a bit more experienced than myself, I think there gets to a point where a lot of people maybe do a lot of it themselves on the growth phase, and then when they get to a certain stage of maybe wealth or age or experience or time, I suppose, they start to do a bit more of this lending, don't they? I think that seems to be a pretty common thing, and I completely get that, by the way. Why would you do a load of the hard work when you can just get a nice return on your money? I
Well,
completely.
there's a balancing thing. There's no matter how thinly you slice anything, there are two sides to it. And one is, well, if you funded a deal, you're either just getting an interest rate where you don't own the deal, so you're having to fund again, or you get a joint venture where you've got a share of the ownership, or you co-own it. So you fund something, but you get a percentage of the whole asset. So every option is different, and I'm just completely relaxed about what that looks like for the person I'm working with, what that needs to look like for me, and how both sides see a good win for themselves. And also that money's not inexhaustible. There's got to be a timing issue when it's right. Sometimes, money's committed and there isn't something I can look at, but I might connect them to somebody else who might be the right person to connect to. So connections is an important part of all of this as well, isn't it?
Definitely, definitely. I love that. Love that. It's an interesting angle for sure. So let's get on to the wealth builders for families thing. So honestly, I think it's a fantastic concept. I think I haven't seen anybody else trying to do what you guys are doing. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that, and the audience a little bit about that? What is wealth builders for families? How does it work? What's the offer? Yeah, a bit of an overview would be great.
Well, I think that it kind of started in earnest when I became a granddad. And I was reading something, I was reading a book, and what struck me was it was talking about how every decade life expectancy increases up by as much as 3 years. And you look at that and think, well, that's interesting. I know in a recent conversation you had with one of my team, you were talking about everybody should be hopefully more successful than the generation before. And I believe with good planning, that should happen as well. And I was thinking, how am I going to be helpful to my grandchildren? Because when I look at the life expectancy of a child born today, it's at least 100 years. Now, if 95% of the population don't become financially independent when they live to 80, how on earth are we going to equip our children to fund a life that's going to take them to 100 and beyond? You can't do that unless you plan to leave an outstanding legacy for yourself. So I started to think about, how do you create the legacy that isn't about what you leave in terms of just money, but what wisdom you leave as well? What are life's lessons that you can leave? And I looked at the school system and I was thinking about it, I'd send my kids to private school. What am I going to do with my grandchildren? Thinking the school system is continually failing on the subject of financial literacy. And nothing is happening about that. Now, of course, you'll be aware that I've been supporting a petition to get financial literacy taught in schools once and for all. And I'd love if we can send you a link for your audience if they would like to back that. Just means putting your signature to it. Then we've already got more than 10,000 signatures now. And, if you get 10,000, the government have to take notice. You get to 100,000, the whole thing is delivered, to number 10. So we want to get to 100,000 signatures. Anyway, the point coming back to that was, if the schools can't teach it, won't teach it, because even if they could put on the curriculum, the current teaching profession is not equipped to be able to have the lessons that at least will last for 25 years of a child's, from a child to a young adult, let's say. No school touches them for that long. Who is the logical guide? Who is the logical mentor in the process? It's got to be parents and grandparents. But they don't know enough. So how do you then create a process to teach parents and grandparents enough in the right age-appropriate way to convey messages, lessons, opportunities, games, all sorts of things from children from 5 to 25? So I wrote that. Now it's ready.
Yeah.
Having said that, not being arrogant about it, because that's not a good thing. I didn't write it, I curated it. So what I mean by that is I can write materials and I can create books, and I've written a number of them, but I knew this was too big a task. So I started to look for who was doing something good, who had a niche in this space. Children's authors who are writing really good stuff about finance, but didn't have the whole program. So we engaged them. People like the brilliant people at Go Henry, who provide the smart cards for young kids, because money's invisible to children these days. And when something's invisible, it's unappreciated and it's poorly understood. If you think about it, if you ask the average 7, 8-year-old, what does mummy or daddy do for a living? They don't know because they don't see it. If you talk to them about money, I'd one of my clients, one of my mentees said to me recently, he said he was talking to his like 21-year-old, and he said to him, the kid said to him, Dad, I've just had a bill from HMRC. He said, and we don't even bank with them. And it's like, doesn't realize that tax is tax coded. And when you get certain benefits in your employment, you've got to pay additional tax on that. So our younger people are just poorly equipped. So I wanted to try and create the right information and guidance to stimulate parents to become great money role models for their kids, and where grandparents can get involved or other people who care, who've got a stake in the child's relationship in their future. And it could be auntie, uncle, could be any of those, to learn enough lessons to secure their own oxygen mask first before helping the next generation, but deliberately and conscientiously help them. And we've written that program now. So we share that. We do it at super low cost because we don't want any kid not to have the benefit of that. So it's less than £1 a day. It's crazy. And we've done it deliberately to make it a no-brainer for people just to go, if I've got kids, why wouldn't I do that? Why wouldn't I spend £1 a day to get myself and my children to become money-savvy children who turn into money-savvy adults? It's not a parenting thing. We can't make kids better, worse than they're going to be. We can't make a howling teenager turn into a calm one. But what we can do is at least give them enough skills, tools, and knowledge to be able to make good decisions, so that when money touches their life, which it does from very early age, whether it's pocket money or not pocket money, whether it's digital cards or not digital cards, whether it's games or not, all of those things, the money weaves itself like a fabric through the very essence of our lives. And we must teach children how to appreciate it, how to understand it, and then as they get older, how to learn slightly different lessons. Now, I think where the school will come in is, instead of teaching Pythagoras, they might teach pensions. Instead of trigonometry, they might actually teach taxes. There might be something they teach that actually makes sense, but still in the whole rounded process, ultimately it's the parents who have to take responsibility.
Because you think there's quite a few things I want to sort of unpack on what you said there. But the first one is, like, I get this petition, by the way, and I'm up for that. But do you believe that even if we got 100,000 and it went to number 10, do you honestly think they are? Do you not think it's intentional? I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of conspiracy theories here, but I think it is intentional. Me personally, I think that it is intentional, that the way the school system is, so that they don't want people to be money savvy adults. That's what I believe. I think it's too intentional. I think they want employees, they want people who just tick along, pay the taxes, do the thing, so the powers who are above benefit. That's personally what I think. It is intentional. And I think even if we've got 1 million signatures, there'll be a way around it. Even if it's taught, it won't be taught properly, or they'll teach something that isn't necessarily 100% accurate. That's just my belief. Do you believe? I do also believe, by the way, before you jump in, I do also believe it's up to the parents. Ultimately, no matter what you taught at school, I think the parents could what's the word? Not overrule, but you know what I'm trying to say. The parents could have a bigger impact than what they taught at school.
No question. No question.
Because a lot of people, regardless what they taught at school, don't listen. I didn't listen to anything at school. They could have been teaching me Japanese for all I was aware. I wasn't listening anyway. So there's a few different parts to that, though. But first part of the question is, do you honestly believe that if we get loads of signatures, they are going to implement something that is good enough to actually impact the kids?
Okay, so let's try and unpack that, Terry. First of all, I don't think there's a conspiracy theory. I think it's just laziness. I think it's dogma that says, the educational system was built on the principle of a curriculum which, while is outdated and is not equipping our children to be set for life. It's set for failure in many respects because they're living longer in any event, as I mentioned. I think the school system just is not well designed for a 21st century life. It's just not. Will they change it? Probably not. But if they did, it would be like SATs. It would be kids all lined up taking little mini tests to tick a box for Ofsted to approve. So I don't think it's likely that it will be done robustly with a serious long-term intention for money-savvy adults, but not because it's a conspiracy to hold the average man down. The reason why I think it's not that is because if you look at the demographics, the national statistics, we're talking about the state pension age going from 65, which it was, to 66 now, to 67, to 68. Where's it going to end up? When your youngest reaches that sort of age, it'll be 80. So the point is, the demographics will never work in favor of holding people back, but they're never going to teach entrepreneurialism because the whole educational system is built on reflecting the age when the education system got created, which was a whole different thing. There wasn't entrepreneurship. I think there are some pockets of excellence in schools, but going back to my point about mediocrity, the school market, if it's a market, would be mediocre. Parents can be outstanding. So we want outstanding parents for more than just the reason to be able to send your child off to do whatever they want to do, whether it's college, university, or a job or a business or a career, whatever they want to do is fine. But you need to be in a place where money touches it all. However they live a life, they need to be financially savvy enough to make good decisions. In the absence of that, what's going to happen? Who's going to influence them if you don't? Facebook? Phishers, scammers? Money's already invisible. TikTok is everything's about speed. You get your result now. There's no long-term planning. There's no planting a seed and wait for the fruit to grow. It's you get everything today. There'll be excess amounts of debt. There'll be kids who can't find a solution, so they'll resort to cryptocurrency or some other high-risk investment. That's already happening now, by the way. You'll be a target on their back for banks when they see the opportunity to make money from additional loans. So all we'll have is an increasingly debt-ridden society where, if you think about the current generation, not seeing anything positive around them. You're seeing wars in the Middle East. They're seeing lots of news, which is all negative. And when you surround children, it sounds like I'm getting quite political, but I'm not. But when you surround people with a life that feels uncertain, then they never feel they can create certainty for themselves. And the only way to do that is to help them understand money. Then when they understand it, to make money work for them and become financially wealthy, because wealth creates certainty when there is uncertainty. And that's the only thing that I can do, is teach people how to create certainty when everything else around them is not. And once they do that, by the way, and the final point I'll make about parents is, if you don't do that, and we know there's a tsunami of money going to flow from baby boomers like me to the next generation, if they're ill-equipped to handle the money when they get it, or they feel entitled, that money will be dissipated and wasted, and it will just go in a generation or two generations. The way I teach it and the way I share it is to teach parents how to create wisdom, stewardship, and a legacy that the next generation embrace, like passing a baton, accept the baton with good grace, and then their job is to build that expansion for the next generation and for the next generation and for the next generation. So it's to give back, not to consume. And that's a cultural thing that I'm trying to create. So it's a big job I've got. I hope I live long enough to do it, but I'm doing it every day now in my life. So you start wherever you are, right? If you've got kids who are 3, 4, 5, just, I'm going to share all the lessons here, but there's so many lessons of games, of showing children, having conversations that aren't about minimalizing things and about scarcity, but just to encourage dialogue about money. and to be willing to understand that you can't compare yourself to everybody like you used to do, because everything in the past was like you at school, me at school. I went to school in Newcastle. I was from a council house place, and you were in a block of flats in Throckley. All of these things create a background which says who you surround yourself with. Well, nobody was rich, but now who you surround yourself with is social media. So you see the instant riches available from other people, and you compare yourself to that, and then, oh, why can't I have that? And then all of a sudden that creates a psychological barrier and depression and all sorts of emotions that can set in. So I'm just trying to get the parents to a good place to say money is a proper subject. Let's embrace it. Let's get involved. Let's play games. Let's take them to places. Let's show them things. Like you with property, take them. Let them feel the experience of it. Temper that to make sure it's not entitlement, but they feel the energy of it. And if you can do that, you should be able to impart good knowledge, irrespective of how they turn out, Terry. We just don't know that.
Yeah. A few things on that as well. I think just going back, I think like surely the people that write the curriculum, that make the decisions on the school content, like they know this is happening. And that's why I've just got zero confidence in it'll ever change. That they know what is, and they know what is happening to this new generation. They know the impact of TikTok. They know what's happening. Attention spans are going down. Entitlement. They know all this is happening, and they're still. And I don't know, but I'm pretty sure this wouldn't be in the first petition that's floated around to try and do this. I've seen numerous people online. I think Robert Kiyosaki, who's been massive on this wealth education for years and years, I think he's tried to do something like this. A lot of people have.
It's interesting.
And I've got zero confidence it's ever going to get done. So I think that leads on to nicely, which is like, it is up to the parents. It is up to us. I really wish that it was taught in schools and it would help everybody and everyone would be a bit more money savvy. But I'm trying to take it into my own hands as a parent to do the right thing by my kids and make them into good adults. But like I said on your podcast, when I was speaking to Christian, was like nobody's really talking about what you should be doing with your kids, what you shouldn't be doing with your kids in order to make them good with money or make them responsible. Because ultimately nobody knows the answer to that, which is probably why. But you mentioned a few things like games, like things you could do with your kids maybe that would make them understand money or get better with money. Could you give us a couple of little ideas? Or
what age group would you like me to talk about?
So maybe talk about sort of under sixes and then talk about teenagers.
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah, okay. So under sixes. So look, all the evidence is psychologically that children's opinions and children's decision making starts to be formed up to the age of 7. Okay, so there's so much evidence of that. I don't need to be the author of that. There's just so much to it.
Up until 7, yeah.
7, yeah. So a lot of their formulas in life will be framed by what they learn up to age 7. So what can you do? Well, number one, pay attention to the language you use. Like you could probably ream off a few, right? My dad was always turn them bloody lights off. It's like Blackpool Illuminations in here, right? Something like
that.
Money
doesn't
go on trees.
Right,
all that. Just be mindful of language, number one. Number two, there's so many good children's books that have been written with a money lesson, like a money fable. There's a great book, Grandpa's Fortune Fairy Tales, for example. Just a brilliant book. And this guy called Will writes a blog every week. What he does when he takes the kids to McDonald's, says, he talks about buying shares in McDonald's and you can own a share of everybody's hamburger that you see around, so things like that. You can take them to a piece of property. I mentioned that I've got some of my clients, they'll take their kids to a property when it's still not yet fully done, and the kids will draw on the walls, and they'll have discussion about what you think it would look like, and whether they like property or don't, they'll still embrace the idea. You could use jars for pocket money but I would encourage real money, because real money is tangible, and everywhere you look, money's on tap, literally, isn't it? Tap your card, tap your phone.
Yeah.
They don't see it. Play Monopoly. I know you do that. There are shorter versions of that and other games you can play, including Monopoly cards, and you can even personalize Monopoly called My Monopoly. There's so many different games that you can play with there's also Kids Cash Flow 101, which is Kiyosaki's game. And we play with adults Cash Flow 101. We got a game in London on coming up in the next few days, and there'll be 50 people playing a game, grown-ups playing a game of Cash Flow 101. So there's so many things you could do. Teenagers, obviously more challenging, but again, it's more about involvement. It's about explaining to them things that are relevant. It's also about giving them experiences, like taking them somewhere, taking them to the place you work, taking them when you go shopping, so they can look at the cost per litre or the cost per whatever, or you need to do some insurance, get them to do a bit of research and then report back. If you've got a SaaS like I've got, you could say to a younger child, right, we're now going to start planning to invest for you. If I give you £10,000 to invest, come back to me with a PowerPoint presentation of what you would like to invest in. Or what are you doing to protect the planet? What are of the 17 different United Nations stated benefits for mankind, which of these do you support, and how could we help you? How could you, as you see your grandparents getting older, how could you take your iPhone and record conversations with them for posterity, so that they're locked in a digital vault, so that when they get older, more infirm and more forgetful, you can replay that? Or eventually when they die, you've got a memory of them that's captured. There's so many things you can do. I'm scratching the surface in this conversation, but
I mean, some of them I've never heard before. Actually, weirdly, I heard one because I did your podcast last week, the week before. In between that podcast and this podcast, it was actually on Facebook talking about social media. Some guy was saying what he gets his kids to do is he gets them to read one of his favorite books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, one of these, the staple ones, and he'll say, if he's done in the past, read this book, it's great for you, you'll learn this, you'll learn that. Most kids are just going to go like that, aren't they? Throw it away. But what he says to them is, using the good old technique of incentivizing, or you could call it bribery. You could say, so if you read this book and you summarize it and tell me what you've learned, I'll give you £100 extra pocket money. But if you don't summarize it well enough, you're going to get nothing. If you summarize it really good, when it's a good few pages and you wrote it down, you might get 150. So he said that, like, I think it was his daughter, it came back with this massively descriptive explanation of the book. I mean, unfortunately, they might use ChatGPT or something.
I was just about to say that little does Dad know the £100 he just did in 5 minutes on AI.
Yeah.
So
but I thought that was a good concept, because like most people have had those moments where they've read a book and it was like, bang, light bulb moment. That changed it all for me. It might have been a podcast, it might be a book, it might be a video, it might be an experience. But most people have got one about a book, haven't they? That book changed the way I think about this. I'm going to try and implement that with my children for sure, because I'd love for them to just understand some of the things that I understand. And I think, unfortunately, certainly at certain ages, you might try and sit your kids down and say, explain something to them. And because you're the parent, the mum or the dad, that might think, nah, I'm not listening. Certainly that teenager age, they might just discount what you're saying. So
there's an element of that. And part of what we've had that question before, and I would say the value in having a community of parents, enlightened parents, all think about this, is nobody knows the right way. So when let's say you were in a community and you were giving that example, somebody will take that and go, oh, that's a bloody good idea. I really like that. and they'll use that. If it works for them in their situation, they'll use that. But the other thing which we haven't done yet, but we will do, recognizing that especially teenagers don't necessarily want to take advice from the parents. I've got one of my clients says, he says he's going to have a chat about money, and they say, "You're not going to get your PowerPoint up again, Dad, are you?" So things like that. And my kids will often say to me, "You're not talking about your sass again, are you, Dad?" Even though they're grown-up kids, So there's always going to be a bit of that.
Definitely. Different dynamics.
But you've got grandparents, you've got aunties and uncles, we've got the idea of being able to get children together to do certain things in an environment where the parents are fully supportive of the lessons that are being taught, almost like workshops, curriculum-based workshops, but with money in mind. They're not done yet. So this is a lifelong, probably my swan song project, but it will be a journey of discovery for me as, my kids are grown up now, but the lessons that I'll see them passing on to their children, and then the lessons that some of the parents who are in our membership tell us they're doing, and somebody else goes, "Wow, I never thought of that." So lots of interesting things. So if anybody's got an idea they use with their children, whether it's, there's always a heated debate about pocket money versus non-pocket money. That's a big one. But, what do you do? How do you help? How do you give them a sense of value? What are you doing to help them think about financial decisions? And I've written 7 principles. Won't go into those, but I'll just talk about one, which is the idea of planting seeds. So Will, who's written the book Grandpa's Fortune Fairy Tales, talks about his kids planting a seed which leads to a future forest. Right. So the encouragement of planting seeds and seeing things taking time is a really important lesson. So that's a lesson you can just embrace and go, how do I, for a young person, could I get them to, maybe you did this when you were a child, you planted a seed yourself and saw the crest grow because it took 2 days. Well, could they be responsible for a pet? Could they be responsible for a plant? Could they be responsible for a small fruit tree or a, whatever it would be, so that they feel the delay as opposed to instant gratification? So many different ideas that parents will be stimulated from each other. So if any parent wants to know more, just get in touch, because we can't share enough of this, frankly.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think, I know we're pushed on time, but I think that another important thing from me, I think should be, I don't know if it is in your offering or not, but I think just as important, kids should be taught about wealth, money, all of this type of stuff that we're talking about, be savvy, with money. I think a massive thing that I don't think is taught in schools either. Maybe it's because it's a conspiracy theory. I don't know. But why aren't they taught, like, this healthy body, healthy mind connection is 100% there? Why aren't they taught about keeping fit? No, they're taught sports science and they do PE, but they're not taught about the importance. That's why so many people are overweight. They've got terrible diet habits, eating absolute rubbish. Like this is a big part that I think it's our responsibility as parents to pass on money habits, but also diet habits and health habits as well. Because if you've got all the money in the world, but you're unhealthy, sitting on TikTok eating Burger Kings, then the money's irrelevant if you've got no health. So I think that's a huge part of it. And kind of to summarize, I think when I heard about what you were doing, I thought it was great. And like I say, that's why I'm happy to sort of endorse it. I think it's fantastic. I think it's a really important thing that not many people are doing. But I think my view of this whole subject anyway is it ultimately, you as the parent need to upskill yourself first if you're not there. And then you need to get yourself there and then learn how to pass that down in the best way that you can. And you're never going to get it right because you can't really predict. I know you don't like predictions. You can't predict how your children are going to turn out. But if you just upskill yourself, do things like mastermind, do things like mentoring, do courses, read books, listen to podcasts, get yourself right, health and wealth, and learn how to pass it on to your children. And And this thing really stuck with me when I heard it is each generation should be healthier and wealthier than you. Your kids should be healthier and wealthier than you are. And then your kids' should be healthier and wealthier than your kids.
Yeah.
And I think the starting point is you, though. You've said it like as well. Like the starting point is you, isn't it? Getting
Well said.
yourself right.
Well summarized. And I think it's long overdue, this sort of health wealth combination. And probably it might be something that, we try and do as well, which is to combine the two. But because I'm not a health expert, with lessons and inspirations that I can share, but nonetheless other people are, I've focused my life around the finances. Other people will focus around the health side, and others mental well-being. I'm sure there's a whole kind of Venn diagram was taught in schools, the overlapping of the circles. There's probably
Yeah,
something in that, which might be another conversation another day about how to take wealth, health, and mental well-being to the next level, given the uncertainty that we have in the world right now.
definitely. Definitely. Well, I love your message, Kevin, and thank you for coming on. If anybody wants to reach out, or if anybody's interested in this Wealth Builders for Family stuff that you do, what's the best way?
Yeah, just wealthbuilders.co.uk. And if you have got a link to the petition, just even though you think it's a conspiracy, I don't, but nonetheless, if we get 100,000 signatures, I'll be knocking on the door myself.
Good, good. Well, I wish you all the best, and I really hope I'm wrong. I really hope it does make a difference. But what we can control is control affecting the parents.
That's
And
right.
I'm certainly going to do that with the people that I mentor and know and my friends in my circles for sure, because I think it's a massively important message. So, but thank you for coming on, man. I enjoyed the conversation as always, and thank you, and have a nice rest of your day.
All right, enjoy that. Thanks a lot. Appreciate the
Thanks.
invitation. Bye-bye.